Welcome back, motorized bike enthusiast. A relatively simple video today, as this is just my first impressions of the S.A.F super clutch from DLH Performance. Because this is my first time installing one of these, I'm not really the go-to guy for a tutorial, so I'll leave a link in the description on a brief installation video he made, as well as a more detailed one. The first one's good if you just want to see what you're getting into, and the second one's good to follow along for installing it yourself. Although towards the end of the video I will cover a few points that I feel might help some people installing one of these for the first time, I didn't actually have any major issues. As a matter of fact, I have very few. I do have some concerns for longevity, which I'll cover towards the end of the video, but these are just speculation at the moment, as I don't know how this is going to perform in the long run. If you're just here for my first impressions and key points, as well as a little bit of additional information, you can skip towards the end of the video. But since I know a lot of my viewers like the nice purr of a two-stroke, we're going to jump onto some ride footage real quick. After installing the clutch, I took it for a brief ride around the neighborhood to help the pad set in and make any fine adjustments I would need to make, as there will be some break-in with this clutch. You'll need to make a few adjustments. But the footage you're about to see is the second ride I ever took on the super clutch, and it's about a 20-minute ride. Of course, we're not going to do all that here, just some of the key moments. During the ride, there'll be a few good pulls, but I don't go crazy with top speed. I'm just cruising around. One of the things about this super clutch is it holds on like a pit bull. So if for some reason my tune is bunk and I seize the motor, that rear tire will lock up and it will not slip. So I'm not going to go too crazy. For a few brief moments at the beginning and towards the end of the ride, you'll notice me fake pedaling a little bit. This is simply because this bike screams cop bait, and although my state is in a bit of a gray area and I've never had any issues on a motorized bike, this one just screams pull me over. With that out of the way, we'll get on to the ride, and I'll see you once I hop off the bike. Oh my God. All right, let's sum it up. Okay, so a few things I noticed right off the bat. First, obviously, it doesn't slip, and it doesn't feel like it's ever going to slip. And this is just the stock Minarelli cylinder at the moment. I'm curious to see how well it holds once we get to the ported cylinder, but from what I understand is it's just not going to slip. The bike feels like it has more low-end power because of this. Now, of course, once it gets on the pipe, it stays nice and smooth, and the motor doesn't run away because the clutch isn't slipping, but the slipping also happens in the low end. You just don't notice it as much, and because you basically don't have any wasted energy with this thing, you just feel stronger pulling up hills and pulling from a dead stop. Now, obviously, this clutch is not designed for a stock motor. I don't think a China doll of any modification could justify using this kind of clutch, as it just seems like it would be overkill. But the Minarellis, well, if you've used them, you know they like to slip. I purchased this super clutch from DLH Performance. I'll leave a link in the description. He has two options on his store at the time of recording. The budget version, which comes in, I believe, just under $50, and then the super clutch, which is what I have. And then, of course, there's options to pick different customized face plates for them. This was one he customized for me. Much appreciated. Looks pretty sharp. I love it. Love the logo. He's going to have a third option as well, which is kind of a middle ground between the budget and the high end. Now, besides having customized differences, I believe the springs are going to differ between these options. If you have clutch slipping issues but you don't plan on going above a China doll, you might consider his budget option being something that could definitely help you out. And it would also open the door if you decided to go more performance oriented in the future with a beefier motor. You just have all that knocked out of the way. Darcy has been very helpful with any questions I have. I message him on Facebook and he gets back to me within 24 hours, and it's made installation of this very easy. Although it's relatively simple as it was, I did have a few questions and concerns which he quickly answered. Now, I'm not sponsored by DLH Performance. This clutch wasn't given to me, but he did reach out to me and see if I wanted to do some videos on it, and I decided to. But I'm in no ballpark here. There's going to be some cons, I'm sure, and I'll be sure to point them out. A few of them I would like to get out of the way right now, which is really not an issue with the clutch itself. It's just a concern for longevity and some other upgrades which are probably going to be required. Now, if you have beastly hand strength and carpal tunnel does not concern you, you can probably get away with using the stock clutch lever in the motorized bike kits. Me, however, I'm going to be upgrading to this with something that has a little more leverage, probably a dirt bike or a motorcycle clutch. I'm also going to be upgrading the clutch cable to something a little more beefy. These cheap clutch cables can tend to stretch even with the stock motorized bike clutch. Once you add this, you're probably going to stretch the heck out of that cable. As you could tell throughout the ride, the disengage was getting worse and worse, to the point where I was afraid if I stopped the bike, I wouldn't be able to get it going again just because the cable stretched out so much. Of course, some of this is also going to be the pads wearing in, so they'll set and the pressure plate will get closer to the motor. That means you have to adjust it. The bucking bar is probably going to wear in a little bit, as well as the bearing and the clutch cam. Now, I asked Darcy from DLH about the clutch cam and the bucking bar, what he expects out of them for longevity. He says he's never actually had to change a clutch cam due to it wearing out, so that's a good thing. However, I have concerns that mine might wear out because it was already showing signs of wear with the stock clutch. Just cheap Chinese metal, I guess. The bucking bars, they're just going to be a normal wear item from what I understand. I don't know exactly how long you can expect them to last, but they're hardened steel. It's pretty much the best you can get with a stock clutch assembly. Even if you add a beefy mainspring to your stock clutch, those bucking bars tend to wear out faster, so if you do replace them with something, try to get the best steel you can. Now, because this is just first impressions, I'm curious to see how many times I'm going to have to readjust this clutch as these parts wear in. I'm hoping that by next week I'll have it dialed in just right and I won't constantly need to be making adjustments on it. So look forward to the update video on this whenever it comes out. Probably next week, but I can't guarantee that. I only have a few more things to cover about this clutch, which I'm going to do on camera here in just a moment, but I want to let you guys know that I'm going to move this bike into the background and be working on it in between videos for a couple of weeks, as I want to get this thing dialed in just right and fully adjusted. You might see a couple little update videos, especially about the clutch, if I was able to get it adjusted without constant adjustments. But other than that, I'm going to be working on this in the background because I need to work on some of the other bikes for a little while. The LD100 needs its dual CDI, the Path Dragon's getting the Phantom 85, or the new Minarelli from Custom CC, Southern Custom CC. So I'm going to be working on some of the other bikes in the upcoming videos for a couple of weeks, and the next time you see this bike showcased, it should be a monster. Here's hoping. Alright, now I'm not covering the full installation of the super clutch in detail simply because it's the first time I ever done it. Might make some mistakes, definitely going to have to make some adjustments, and I just don't have all the information. But I do want to cover a few points, most of which are covered in DLH Performance video, but just to let you know that they do have some significant importance, will definitely make things easier, and a couple of things that might not be in the video simply because each one of these motors is a little bit different, so you just got to deal with inconsistencies. Now, first off, you're going to be removing the following parts from your stock clutch assembly. You're not going to use any of this. Both collars, the mainspring, this little pressure plate return spring, and the pin that holds in this shaft. So we're going to call this the flower nut shaft. Okay, these are the only real pieces you're going to be using from your stock clutch assembly other than the basket itself. So you'll be using this. Now when you punch out these pins to tap these holes for the shoulder bolts, you're going to want to make sure you have a 1/4 inch by 20 tap. All right, so that's going to be imperial or standard, whatever you want to call it. In his installation video, he recommends taking sandpaper, wrapping it around where the bearings go onto the shaft, and sanding this down just a little bit, just enough so that the bearings easily slide on and off. You don't want to go too far because you do not want the bearings to have any slop, but just enough to where you can easily get the bearings to slide on and off without using a tool or beating on them. Highly recommend doing that. It's going to make your life a lot easier when you put this back in the motor and start making fine adjustments. Next, in my situation, I only had to remove one bearing, and it was the one on the clutch side. Okay, so I decided that I was going to punch out this bearing. I just left this one in the case on the drive side. When you install this shaft back into the motor and you go to push this bearing back in, after you seat this bearing all the way back into the motor, feel the clutch, spin it, make sure it's not binding. If it feels like there's a lot of resistance when all you have installed is this shaft, then go to the other side of the motor and tap on the shaft to push it back out just a little bit. Just taps, you're not hammering on it, you're just tapping it. And then it should free back up. That's what happened to me. After I reseated this bearing, there was a lot of resistance on the clutch shaft, so I just went to the other side and gently tapped on the shaft with a hammer, and she freed right up. These flower nut shafts come in a variety of different sizes. You're just going to have to hope you got lucky and that you get the one with the longer thread pattern. As you can see, this one has a shorter thread pattern. This will probably still work, but you're not going to have a lot of threads for adjusting the clutch. This one gives you just enough threads to have all the adjustment you really seem to need on this setup, and it makes sure that the lock nut has plenty of thread to grip with the nylon. Okay, now you can purchase these separately online. eBay, Amazon, I'm sure the motorized bike websites have them too. I have no idea how to find the ones with the longer shaft. For me, it wasn't a problem because the stock flower nut shaft on my Firestorm bottom end was the longer thread pattern. Also, the actual shaft itself can be longer or shorter on some of these. Now, these two have the same length of shaft. Now he gives you a nice long bucking bar, so it'll work with both the long and short shaft, and you still do use the bucking bar bearing. However, once you install this long bucking bar, you're probably going to have to trim it. Here's why. When this bucking bar is installed in the clutch shaft, it's going to stick way out. And that will probably cause your clutch cam cover here to also stick out. Now for me, it stuck out about that far, and he recommends only shaving this shaft down 1 millimeter at a time. And do that. Install it, pull the clutch lever, and make sure everything seats in place. Okay? Mine was sticking way out, and it looked like I had to shave off about 5 millimeters. Only turned out to be about 2, and the reason why is after I installed this shaft, bolted this down, I could hear something inside seat. It was like a click. And then it turns out that I only had to take off about 2 millimeters. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or if nothing else, were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.